Sovereign citizen ideology essentially comes from the United States, right? In the 1970s, it emerged during a particularly difficult financial context.
Mhm.
But what happened quite quickly is it actually came to Australia, we start to see it in Australia around the 1980s, and it really sort of took off and became a bit more litigious, a bit more vexatious until we get to around 2017. And this is when we start seeing the sovereign citizen movement sort of escalating in rhetoric and becoming a little bit more violent in what they're saying and doing. Now, when we're talking about the movement, we're not talking about an organized group with a centralized hierarchy or anything like that. We're talking about a really diverse array of individuals and sometimes small clusters of individuals who are all united by this central belief that the government as we know it is fundamentally illegitimate. And because it's illegitimate, you can reasonably resist it and oppose it. And this is where we start seeing some of those really dangerous ideas come out about particularly politicians, but also law enforcement and members of the judiciary being traitors to the Australian people and therefore possible threat.
And as to the prevalence, I mean, do we know if it's growing? Is it hard to gauge that in Australia?
Look, it is really hard to gauge. We have seen some reports from law enforcement in the past about possible numbers, and academics as well have attempted to identify possible numbers through court rulings. One thing that makes it almost impossible to measure is that the sovereign citizen belief system is really personal in some ways and really hybrid in others. So one sovereign's belief system isn't going to exactly match the next, which makes it really difficult to both identify but also to calibrate the ideology.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but generally those who follow the belief claim to be non-violent. What have you found in your work?
Look, the vast majority are nonviolent and they
Mhm.
generally pursue vexatious litigation and actions through the court system. But what we have seen in Australia in the past sort of 7 or 8 years is this escalating and violent rhetoric. So threatening people in all sorts of horrible ways, particularly in association with their jobs. So, if you're a politician, if you're a member of the police force, or if you work in the court system, particularly the family court system, within the sovereign ideology, generally speaking, they may see you as a malevolent insider, someone who knows that the government is illegitimate and who is actively working to oppress Australian citizens, which in their view makes you the enemy. And so when you've got that sort of ideology in play, where you've got this sort of division between friends and enemies so obviously, it does lead to that legitimation of violence against these people.
We know the movement is on the radar of our intelligence agencies, but what do we know about that?
Well, look, I think one of the things to be aware of with the sovereign threat today and also moving forward is that it's extremely adaptive, which means that, like, for example, during COVID-19,
Mhm.
we take the normal sovereign citizen belief system that's largely anti-government, largely focused on alleviating mortgages and taxes, and then we throw COVID-19 into the mix. All of a sudden, we're seeing sovereign citizens catalyze around health conspiracies, ideas that the government is so oppressive that it's secretly trying to conduct these horrible health actions against the average citizen to ensure their slavery. We also see them catalyze against border lockdowns, and suddenly we see them focus on things like the Colonial Boundaries Act. So they're very adaptive. And COVID-19 was an example of just how resilient they are in changing contexts. So I think one thing we need to be aware of moving forward as a society is that as events change in society around us, the sovereign ideology is uniquely positioned to adapt with that change in order to continue. And in that way, I think it's quite a persistent and established threat in Australian national security landscapes.